a year of diplomatic and economic turnaround for the country. How do you comment on that?
I believe that the year 2025, as we wrap it up, will be a very memorable one. Something that will last for generations in our memory. That is because of our triumph in the May 2025 war. But in addition to that, perhaps economic historians will also look at this as a bit of a stabilization phase. And the reason for that, you have mentioned correctly, is that we have gone past the crises that began in 2022 and 2023. As you mentioned, we have inflation at a low rate. The state bank is in fact cutting interest rates. Foreign exchange reserves are considered at an acceptable threshold. Ideally, they would be higher. And so now the question is about how we can go to a growth phase. So for economic historians who will look back at this year, they will see this hopefully as a time when things began to jumpstart because of reforms that were taken in the years prior. Now, how the government pulls off an effective growth strategy will also depend on how much it wants to break with history. We have in the past been cyclical in our behavior. We have gone from ups and downs, then returning to IMF and so on. We don't want that, and our finance minister has been very articulate and very sure-footed about the fact that we won't do this again, and therefore the reforms that we take now will be lasting. I think that is a very good sign, because I want us to stay the course, and the reforms that take place now, given the strong political will, given the fact that we have displayed a stamina for being resilient in difficulty, I think it's a very good sign, and I hope to see 2026 be an even better year.
Well, all optimism from all the sides. Dr. Manzoor, I'd like your views as well. A year of economic recovery, a year of economic stabilization. How would you term Pakistan's diplomatic and economic successes that it has achieved this year, and how could it further capitalize on this momentum?
Well, thank you very much. I fully share your views and views of Dr. Usman Chohan that 2025 was quite a turnaround for Pakistan. Just remember 2 years ago, we were just, everyone said, when are we going to default? And then nobody's talking about default. Now it's all the way upturn in all economic factors, the macroeconomic factors. You just mentioned, say, foreign exchange reserves. Just last year, I think they were about 12 billion. Now, state bank reserves are up something like 16 billion, and private banks another 5 billion, so 21 billion. That's almost 2.5 to 3 months import cover. Then you have, stock exchange, one of the world's best performing last year and this year as well. I mean, this is, I think this year they went up something like, I don't know, about 50% up, 50 around that figure. And the other big thing is that inflation, which was very high, I mean, only 2 years ago it had reached almost 38%, historic high. And now it is at a historic low, around 5% to 6%, around that. It's around that. So almost every economic factor, and to top it all, the recent privatization of PIA. I mean, we were stuck in case of privatizations since that steel mill privatization was blocked in 2007. In fact, after those banks were privatized, and telecom companies, etc., in 2003-4, we didn't really have any major privatization. So this has been a big step forward. So hopefully now the pace will pick up, and other major loss-making entities like electricity distribution companies, like some of the banks still in the public sector, like Agriculture Development Bank, etc., would also be privatized in the next few months.
Yeah, coming towards Dr. Usman, so when we talk about economic recovery, how do you see the government putting in effort to actually materialize and capitalize on this momentum that we built? What could be your suggestions with regards to making further effort to actually, and in a wider scope, expand the momentum that we've built on to increase more investment in the country and to increase more business and trade activities here?
That's a very good question. First of all, I agree with Dr. Manzoor's assessment, and greetings to Dr. Manzoor. As far as momentum, I think it's a very interesting word, because momentum is a function of velocity over time. And I think that in terms of momentum, our government is generating momentum now. The reason is that stabilization required us to hit the brakes on many things. For example, hit the brakes on rampant inflation. For example, on imports. We had to strike balances amongst our fiscal deficit, current account deficit, and so on. And now we are in a very unique and sweet spot, given all the factors that have been discussed, where we can actually consider the generation of momentum if we so choose. But the choice is going to be a little tricky, first of all, because we are adhering to a austerity program. We have to fulfill that criterion. And now we are beginning to see where avenues of sustainable growth, I must insist. The sustainability is very important, so that it becomes a multi-year phenomena and not just a cyclical up and down phenomenon. In order to do that, the generation of momentum, I think the PIA example is one where you're seeing an appetite. It was local investors, in fact, that acquired it. You're seeing that there is cash. Now the stock market may be considered hot, overheated perhaps. I would like to see other asset classes reflect that. Then you would see greater momentum, because the heat that we're discussing in the economy has to be dispersed among all sectors. The government is very careful about this, and it was very interesting that the State Bank did lower its interest rates. That's another important locus of momentum. If they are trying to bring down high interest rates, because as Dr. Manzoor noticed, and correctly noted, that inflation has remained low, this means that the opportunity exists. I hope, and I'm in fact very confident, that the government will be very sober in seeing what the timing will be, given international phenomena as well. With tariffs, perhaps oil prices may jump due to instability far, far away from our shores, for example in Venezuela. All of these factors will matter in terms of how the momentum is generated and then sustained.
Dr. Manzoor, we've had this challenge in the past of a boom and bust cycle. How do you think Pakistan could, of course, tackle that challenge now that we have a good momentum going on?
Well, that's always a danger, and perhaps more than the domestic issues, it arises from international. For example, for the last few years, we had this window of opportunity when international commodity prices, especially petroleum, oil, were rather low. And you know, 1/3 of our imports are of petroleum products. So if the prices, like they are now, about $60 per barrel, rise to say double, $120, I mean, we don't have that cushion. So that could create a problem. But I think maybe this time, perhaps we are in a slightly better position, because we have done lots of internal reforms. Maybe two I can mention very specifically. For many years, for almost 20 years, you know, we were seriously lagging behind in exports. One big reason was that we were a very protected economy. This year, at the budget time, government radically moved away from protectionism to opening its economy, so that our industries become more competitive. They announced a 5-year import liberalization, and already done about 20% this year. So in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll be open like these Far Eastern economies. I think the World Bank said that this is one of the most radical reforms they have seen anywhere in the last 10 years. So that's one thing, and that should cushion us. And the other big thing is that just 2 weeks ago, no, maybe last week, the Prime Minister launched very serious regulatory reforms. They are cutting down on red tape and making business much easier. So I think they already announced, the cabinet already approved some 500 reforms to various rules and regulations. And they think that that's going to save us. I don't exactly remember the figure, but huge sums in terms of time saved, and in terms of quickening of various procedures and imports, etc. That's another very big reform this year. I do hope that next year, for example, this year, one of the reasons our exports didn't really increase was that we had serious fall in export of agriculture products like rice. That fell by almost 50%. Not due to local reasons, but mostly it was because India previously was not exporting, and this year they flooded the international markets, so the prices had gone down, and it was the same with some other commodities. But hopefully next year, and also we had problems with floods. And next year, hopefully, we'll be picking up that side as well. So our exports hopefully will be much better. Our reserves are much better, and stock markets, etc., and privatization. So these three or four major factors that I mentioned, but this has built up momentum. And I just one final factor, maybe that recently we've seen all these foreign dignitaries coming to Pakistan to explore purchase of defense equipment like our fighter aircraft, Thunder, and such high value things. So maybe we are moving from not exactly moving, but we are adding another sector to our exports. And in a couple of years, we will be, I think, exporting minerals because the record dig will be operational in 2 to 3 years' time, and some such other things. And our IT exports are already increasing every year by 20%. I think I stop here.
Definitely, and we've always talked about how there needs to be out-of-the-box solution with regards to economy. You've highlighted some very valid points. Dr. Usman, when we talk about the exports of the country, of course there are products that we export, but there's also labor that we export, which contributes to revenue generation in the forms of remittances. Just a few days back, there was a report that the UAE seeks 1.5 million labor by the year 2030. How do you think the country could focus on human resource development with regards to getting more for the labor that it exports or the services sector?
It's a very important sector for us, in addition to the ones that Dr. Manzoor enumerated. It's important to look at labor as a process, with an output being the remittance from the cash flow perspective, and then look at the inputs into human beings. The inputs that we need to focus on are education and healthcare. If you invest in education and you invest in healthcare, you will see a more diversified, richer, more productive, higher value, more diverse group of people. And that too, if they aren't able to be absorbed in domestic demand. But domestic demand is one element and international is another. As long as we can find good markets to give a diversified spectrum of labor export, we will be the ultimate co-beneficiaries of that. That means that we should not be relying exclusively on the Gulf. It is true that the UAE foresees demand for many industries, labor, but there's also the Far East. Yeah. South Korea is very excited about the prospect of having Pakistani people in appropriate sectors. Japan has a deficit in its labor. Then look at some European markets actually have windows for mid to high level people. What I'm really saying is that even while you hear of anti-immigrant sentiment and all of this right-wing nonsense happening, at the same time there are many places where there are pragmatic governments who are looking at the labor deficit, so long as we don't, overwhelm them in numbers. So but for Pakistan, invest in education and healthcare. Look at the full spectrum of labor possibilities, and then expand beyond just the Gulf, and within the Gulf also send the best people at each cadre, from blue collar to white collar, doesn't matter. And it is not just Saudi Arabia and the UAE. There are markets such as Oman and Qatar. And that would be the ultimate best complement, I would say, to our export strategy, because remittance is ultimately a floor, and all export generation above that will lead to a current account surplus, which is the ultimate target.
Well, definitely very well points that you've highlighted. One concluding question from Dr. Manzoor. So when we talk about economy, we talk about revenue generation, there's another aspect that comes to mind, that is how the government is going to tax that revenue generation. With regards to its taxation policy, we know it's always been a challenge, and because our economy was very complex, and the complications that we faced were very hard to maneuver around as well. But with this stabilization, with the recovery that we're seeing, what shift could you suggest or should be seen in Pakistan's taxation policies?
Yes, that is indeed a big challenge, and we need to address that. I think one of the things the government has done is that they have taken out this taxation policy, making powers from Federal Board of Revenue, and set up an independent unit in the Ministry of Finance where there are academic and other experts, not just revenue people who just think of raising more taxes. I mean, this is more those kinds of people who will be looking at the impact of taxes on overall economy. So they'll be looking from the fact that how could lowering taxes could boost our economy. I think that's a big factor. And also the government realized that I think with our taxes are very high. I mean, last year they did it. They reduced tariffs, and so they could not do too many things. But next year, hopefully, the emphasis will be on taxes, especially super taxes and corporate taxes, which are hurting inward investment, and also there were some industries or some multinationals moving out of Pakistan, and I think to ease their burden, they'll be going toward that. So taxation is indeed very important, and the government is fully aware of this.
Right. Thank you both for joining us, Dr. Usman and Dr. Manzoor. Both your views are highly appreciated. And of course, the momentum that we see, all ray of hope all around, and optimism that can be heard from all quarters. When we talk about the year 2025, from global re-engagement to economic stabilization, this year has reshaped Pakistan's trajectory and, of course, has marked a significant shift from survival to strategic importance. That's all that we have from the perspective for today. See you all same time next week. Till then.